There's a logo that is up there on the screen. You see it as DraftKings. It's as beautiful. It's as nice. And we like them a lot. Okay? And they like you a lot. Because they are the top rated sports booking app in the U.S. the way that we like to work. And on top of that, they are safe, they are secure, and they are reliable, Deke. There is nothing better when you hit on that parlay, the same game parlay too. Or, you know, when you just have that one-off, you just feel good about this prop bet. You're like, man, I think that my dog gonna throw a tutty today. Sometimes it just is like that, and DraftKings give you those opportunities. But more importantly, they give you a promo code, and that promo code is MOATS. You use that when you make that first deposit of $5. You're going to get a smooth $200 in DraftKings deposit money. And that is a great situation because you get to use that money to go out there and potentially make more money. It's a good situation. It's like a win-win. You catch my drift?
100%.
But, Deke, I also know at times some people go past 100% and they're not able to turn that switch off. It stays on for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when those people go through those experiences, sometimes you have to ask yourself if you or someone you may know has a gambling problem. They might need some crisis counseling. Shoot, Deke, they might even need referral services. Now, if they're living in New York, on the screen right now, there is a certain number that they could call or text. For my New Yorkers, New York, New York. But for everybody else, the number that you need to call is 1-800-GAMBLER. I said a 1-800-GAMBLER. This recap time, player.
Let's break it down.
So a couple of things, man. When we're talking about Matt Canada and some of the predictability, think of it in the context of a prize fighter, a boxer. Does a boxer start the first round and he's only throwing knockout punches every single time? Or does he have to repeatedly throw the jab? The same boring, predictable punch, right? And it gets to the point where it lulls you to sleep. Why? Because it's the same boring punch. But then a couple rounds later, what do you get? You get that hook, right? Or you get that overhand, or you get that uppercut, the punch that they didn't see because what? You've essentially lulled them to just relax a little bit. So with some of these calls that we see, some of the predictability, it is part of that. And I can show you an example. You brought it up last podcast. Man, why do we run this concept where we send Jalen Warren or Najee Harris to the flat, Pat Fryer move to that mid-tier area to the sideline, and then we'll have the deep over route coming from the backside, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens.
Well, we're talking on these PA boots.
And we're like, man, it looks so predictable. And man, the defense just sitting there waiting on it, right? And we had that again yesterday. But what was the change from that? The touchdown pass to George Pickens, where we gave you the exact same look, but now instead of George being on the front side and running that little hookup route, he goes in, up, and then bursts to the corner, wide open. But that doesn't happen if you call that every single time. You have to set it up. So some of these concepts that we see, yes, is boring. Yes, it's frustrating. But you also can see, especially yesterday, multiple occasions in both the first half and the second half where guys were schemed up running wide open. We had one drop. We had a questionable throw in terms of, hey, man, is that on Pickett throwing it in the end zone, or is that on George Pickens adjusting better in the end zone, right?
Poor Claypool.
You know, it's like we can point to multiple.
Oh, that, you know what? I think that was first half. We scored the touchdown with Pickens anyway.
Yeah, but that was the first half one. But in the second half, we dropped the one to George Pickens on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
He caught the one in the third.
Like a minute left.
Yeah, he caught the one in the beginning of the fourth quarter where we ended up having to I think we ended up settling for a field goal on that. But we could see multiple times, first half, second half, where it was schemed up and it worked. But it was based off of, I got to keep showing you the same thing. It's boring. It looks boring. It looks repetitive. It looks like we know it. But it's those type of things that at times we'll go from that and execute that play and it looks beautiful like I highlighted. The other times we'll come off of that, and then when we do try to scheme up the shot, is lack of execution, whether it's poor throw, because Kenny did have a couple where he missed, whether it was questionable drops where you're like, man, I think this guy's capable of coming down with this
like
pass.
2 or 3 yesterday.
You know, I think of that. And then the third part was the protection. There were some times where everything was on par, everything was good, but then you had the offensive line not being able to sustain it. So when we're talking about why the optimism, or even Matt Canada, why he still has his job, because Coach Tomlin looks at the same tape I'm looking at, and I'm looking at dudes be schemed open. I'm looking at plays work because of the repetitiveness of certain things that he's showing. The problem is we're not getting enough consistent execution